Your source for everything paranormal. Para-X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Merry meet and blessed be, heed the words I call to thee. Honor the old ones in name and deed, hearken not to others' greed. Pray to the moon when she is round, luck with you shall then abound. Respect the earth, the sky, the sea, as you will it, so mote it be. Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the Para-X Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Merry meet everybody and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. The opening was called Dreamlike by Kevin MacLeod, and that ties into tonight's show because we're going to be talking about opening the Akashic Records with Maureen St. Germain. Now, Maureen is the founder of Transformational Enterprises and Akashic Record Guide International. She's an internationally recognized teacher and intuitive. She's also the author, musician, and producer of more than 15 guided meditation CDs, and the author of 4 books, including the one that she paid us a visit on a few months ago, Waking Up in 5D. But tonight we're going to be talking about meeting your record keepers, discovering your soul's purpose, and how to go about opening your Akashic Records from her new book, Opening Your Akashic Records. Now, some people think you might be in a dreamlike state to have to access it that way. Others say it's meditation. Some people think it takes astral travel. So let's bring Maureen in to straighten us all out. And if you have any questions tonight, please send them to me in private chat, because sometimes if the chat room flies by, which it often does, I miss it. And we're also here at www.parax.com if you'd like to join us live and you're not here yet. So Maureen, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know, some people might not be familiar with Akashic Records, so let's, I think, start off by explaining what they are. And I really like the simple explanation you put in the book, that they're the library of all that is and all that may be, but there may be more to it than that. So what are the records, and how and why were they created, and by who? Boy, that's 4 questions in one. Go for it.
You asked some good questions. You can keep me on track if I miss one. So okay. The Akashic Records, indeed, are the record of, think of it like a data bank, like you think of the internet. And it's a resource for information about what you've done in the past, what you're thinking about doing, maybe some future contracts that you may have going on. And we always have free will. So this also means that the future is not struck or printed or put in the records as factual, but simply as a potential. That being said, the records were created after creation by the creators who felt that it would be useful to be able to have a record, an unbiased record of what happens to you in your experiences. And finally, one of the biggest reasons to learn to open the records for yourself is the ability to understand the world around you and get information about what's really happening so that you can make the best decision possible and you can relax and enjoy your life. Because a lot of times we worry and wonder and fret over family or situations or circumstances that we can't control, but we have a part in, we have a place in it. And this gives us the ability to see what we aren't seeing. And then the record keepers are advice givers. So practically every question includes a bit of advice on what to do. And I'll give you examples when the time comes. But what I want to say is it is not fortune telling. But it's very good advice. And it always astounds me, I tell a student to ask this question and then they read me their answer and includes a bunch of advice. That's very cool.
Yeah, well, I was going to bring that up because I was going to say that accessing our records is not like having a psychic reading. I mean, people will not necessarily get predictive information.
That's right.
And go ahead.
You don't seem to need predictive information because the information is so appropriate and helpful that it solves the problem. So, for example, we had a client who was getting ready to buy a piece of property and was anxious because he knew that his lease was up at a certain point, and he was wondering if he would have time to get everything done. And he was told that you would make an offer, and then he would close on, a couple months later. You'll make an offer in this month, and you'll be closing in this month. And he was already into the month they said he was going to make an offer, you see, and he hadn't seen anything that was going to trip his trigger. So time has gone by, and I've spoken with him, and bottom line is everything has come exactly as they said, and he will close, not in the month they said, but very close to that time frame, like the beginning of the next month. So what happens sometimes, you ask a question like, well, what am I to do about my potential move? Should I stay another year? Or am I going to find a place to move into in time to get out for my lease? It's like a hard stop. You either move or you stay. And the record keeper is reassured that there was no problem and he was going to find the place of his dreams. And amazingly, he found a place that he would not have found if he hadn't made a random call on a spur-of-the-moment kind of thing to a realtor he found on Zillow who was representing a property he was interested in. And that realtor had access to the property that he bought, but it wasn't the one he was looking at. It was an unlisted property. It wasn't even in the listings, but he knew about it. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is.
And so the reassurance, everything's going to come down the way you need it to. But then it lets you unhook. It lets you stop worrying. In another example, a man asked about the non-existent relationship he has with his daughter. And the record keepers said the most amazing thing to him. They said that you are a very high being and your daughter was your adversary in another lifetime. And you agreed to sponsor her. And she still sees you as the adversary. And your job is to love her anyway. And it could take up to 4 years before she comes around.
Wow.
But that's cool stuff, right?
Yeah.
Being told 4 years is better than being told, when is she going to love me again? Yeah.
And
that
maybe
relationship,
never. Yeah.
Right. that relationship between a parent and a child is so important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, and it gave him something to work towards, you know, love her anyway. And in a way it happened to me. I had just written a check for $2,000 for my son's tuition, and he wasn't very responsive to me. He didn't like me as a human, and I didn't know what the problem was. He never said what he didn't like. He just kind of moved in another direction. And I lost my job the day after I wrote that check. I had no money in the bank because I'd just given him all my money. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, you know, you think these things when you're in this crisis kind of a thing. I thought to myself, well, I want to know when he's going to appreciate me. And I was just asking out loud, and my guides came in and said, when he's 28. Yeah, and I burst out laughing too. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I had an expectation that he would be grateful, you know, 2 days from now or 2 years from now, right, but not 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. And because I laughed at myself and I recognized that maybe I was holding, you know, a wall up, expecting him to jump over it somehow, mm-hmm, I stopped expecting him to be grateful. Yeah. And I recognized, I gave myself credit for wanting to pay for his tuition because it was important to me, mm-hmm, not to get his gratitude. See? Yeah. It was a very powerful insight.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I wouldn't have had if I hadn't complained.
Somehow, yeah, that'll get you somewhere.
And see, that's what happens in the records. You know, you're complaining about something, you're asking about something, and they give you the big picture, and you suddenly are able to change because you see something you had not been able to see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very amazing.
It is. So how did you first learn about and get acquainted with the Akashic Records? And
well, the first connection I had, I think I was a child, and I had some experiences. And then when I was teaching another kind of coursework, and I was waiting for my host, I fell asleep in her car while she was running an errand. And when I woke up, I had this very clear, lucid message that an astrologer had a message for me. Mm-hmm. So I called the astrologer and left her a message. And the next day we chatted, and I said, are you going to update my chart? And she said, oh, no. But I first have to tell you that I don't do messages for other people. I have guides, and they do give me messages, but I don't typically do messages for other people. So when I checked in and asked my own guides if I should update your chart, they said, no, we have a message for her. And the message was that Maureen was being given access to a dimension that had been closed to humanity for eons. I was being given a permanent guide and some other things that they told me that are more personal. Mm-hmm. So that really was my first introduction. And even at that point, I really hadn't put it together that was the Akashic Records. And then I took some courses from some other groups and found some what I call serious upgrades that need to be done, mm-hmm, updates. So I was following guidance on that. And so the lineage that I was told to start has a lot of additional tools and techniques that the other systems don't teach. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that the other lineages are good. There's no problem with them. But I was told to create this lineage so that people could have a very highly evolved step-by-step process that they could teach themselves if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. Not just take a class. I mean, I love it when people take a class because they learn so much. Sure. But this book has a lot of information in it.
It does. It has a ton of information in it. And, you know, one of the funny things is, you know, you're looking for messages back then, and now you end up being the messenger. So, I mean, yeah, it's a full circle, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's very cool, actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, you know, circling back to that story about my son, what's amazing today is he's the one that calls me all the time, like, you know, 2 or 3 times a week. And why did he not like me back then? Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out he could see. He could see into the ethers. When his brother called in Archangel Michael, he saw a fence go up around the room, mm-hmm, blew him out of the water. And he said, turn the light on. And he said, what did you do? And he said, well, you said you saw, you know, some demons entering the room. So called Archangel Michael silently when I went to turn the light on. And so the reason he didn't want to be connected with me is because he was trying to shut that stuff down.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so once he decided he wanted to be friends with me, it was a natural thing that he got exposed to who I am, and he got exposed to who he is. It was very sweet.
Yeah.
Very sweet, you know, and he's very connected now. He's gets information all the time. He doesn't necessarily trust it yet, but he's sharing a lot of stuff with me, and it's so fabulous for me.
Yeah. Trust is the hard part.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that I teach is a very pure connection to your higher self that you don't have to trust. You can know. And there's such a big difference between trust and knowing, you know. You can't fake a baby, you know. If there's a baby in your tummy, it's there, and, you know, everyone can tell. You know there's a baby there. You might trust that we would meet for lunch. Hopefully I'll show up.
Yeah. Yep.
So, you know, and one of the problems with trust is that we ignore it sometimes. You know, we get some good guidance from our angels or guides, and we overthink it, or we let our ego make the decision. And then we discover in hindsight, oh yeah, my higher self was right. So how do you get over that hump? And that's the protocol that's one of the protocols that's in the book.
Yeah. It's really a jam-packed book full of really, really good information, and we're going to hopefully touch on some of it tonight before the hour runs out. But okay, so what is the Akashic Field, and how does it influence our lives?
Well, it does not influence our lives. We influence the Akashic Field. So we are the makers of the data that goes in. So really, the computer is a wonderful example. You type a letter, and your computer is automatically saving it. Even if you forget to save it, it's there. And so the Akashic Records are this data set in the 11th dimension that contains all this data about what we're thinking about, what we're choosing, what we have chosen, our past lives, and all of it. Now, in order to help people understand the business of what we are choosing, I'll give you an example. And imagine a senior in high school who's thinking about going to college, applies to 3 or 4 schools, has 1 or 2 top schools that he's really interested in. He gets into those 2. So the first data set is the applications. He's thinking about possibly going to these schools. The second data set is him getting accepted at the top 2 schools he wanted to go to. Now he's imagining, if he goes to this one, what life will be like. If he goes to this one, what life will be like. Because you don't make a decision for something like that without putting yourself into the future of it. So that creates a record. Now, once you make a decision, okay, I'm choosing the school in Boston. At that point, the energy for the other school starts to fade. It doesn't go away completely. Once he's at the school in Boston, if he gets to the school and looks around and has, a number of experiences, he's going to do 1 or 2 things. He's going to say to himself, I'm so glad I made this decision. This was really the best choice for me. Or he's going to say, oh man, I should have gone to the other school. I hope this works out because otherwise I'm going to have to transfer out. See what I mean? So at that point, he's still funding the other school because he's thinking about going over there or some other place. Until he makes that decision that he's really happy there, that funding stops. So
does everything that we think or do land up in the records? I mean, like every little thing, or okay,
every little thing.
A sneeze 3 weeks ago, for example. I mean, it's an exaggeration, but something so minute. You picked up something off the floor 3 weeks ago and thought, oh, trash or something. That kind of stuff goes in there too.
Well, it might, but it doesn't matter because you're not going to need that data. But It's there if you did. Maybe that piece of trash had an important phone number on it or a person's name. And maybe in the records you could retrieve the name. What's interesting is the word funding is a word normally used in banking and in insurance and fundraising. Mm-hmm. I'm funding this project. So it is our energy that funds the records. It is our thoughts that fund the data set. Now, I learned from my guides a long time ago about window shopping. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I have this interest in fashion. Mm-hmm. And I like fashion very much, like clothing, and mm-hmm. I like to look at what's being done. And for years and years, I made my own clothes. So it wasn't like I was spending money on fashion. I was just looking at what's out there and then copying it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I was told is that if you put your desire body on something, you're leaving a piece of your energy there. Mm-hmm. And so, and we all understand that. So it stands to reason that even the smallest thought, we would be leaving our energy there. And as a matter of fact, as a side piece of information, you mentioned, you know, that I'm all over the place, and it's true, I travel quite a bit. Mm-hmm. When I travel, I ask Archangel Michael to collect all my lost parts, all these little energy bits of maybe stuff that I left behind in various places, and send it to my arrival city. Mm-hmm. And let that energy there connect with the local time zone. Ooh. Then when I get off the plane, I ask that it be reconnected with me. Now, a good chunk of me is in the proper time zone, and I don't get jet lag. That goes back to your first question. Don't you ever get tired? And the answer is not the way most people do. Yeah. Because I've heard stories, read stories about cats that were left behind. I even read a story about a cat that was given to a neighbor, and then they moved cross country, and the cat found them. Mm-hmm. And it's like a lost part. It's going to come back, but it might take weeks or months. That's why it takes people so long to integrate when they've done international travel. Mm-hmm. But if they knew this trick, they could do this little prayer. Now, I put it in my programming of my Merkaba, and I remind myself that it's going to happen, you know, that way. So I'm expecting it to happen, and it happens. And that really, really makes a huge difference for me.
Yeah, it would. Got a question from the chat room. She said, so in these records, is there information for the paths not chosen previously?
Only up to where you've funded it. So if you were thinking about getting married to somebody, maybe even set a date and then pulled the plug on it, everything up into your breaking up would be there.
Okay. Right. In the beginning of the book, there's a message channeled through you from the keepers of the gates of Akasha. Now, who are these gatekeepers?
Well, they are apparently attached to the records. Mm-hmm. I will tell you that I'm often surprised when beings like this show up and give a message and announce, we are the keepers of the Akasha. You know, and sometimes when they deliver their messages, and it's not just them, but the Lords of Time, or, you know, anything that you and I have never heard of before, if it didn't come through with such passion and purpose, even I would doubt it. Because, you know, who are these guys? So I think their name defines who they are. And one of the things that I tell people about the Akashic Records is you and I don't go in the records. We say that as a phrase, just like we say, right. What should I do? But you really don't mean that. You mean, I need to make a decision. Help me make my decision.
Sure.
So when we go into the records, what we're really doing is going to the threshold and meeting record keepers, beings who embody the records at that threshold. And it's a little bit like a library in the sense that they're pulling data for us as we ask the questions and as we think about the questions we're going to ask ahead of time. And that's one of the things that the lineage that I was taught by my guides does. We actually do what's called opening remarks, or I sometimes refer to it as a download, but it's a piece of information, a bunch of data that I may not have any idea what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. And then the client will say, how did you know I had a boat? Or how did you know that I had a son? Or how did you know blah, blah, blah? Mm-hmm. And of course, I usually laugh and say, I didn't know. It was the record keepers. They just announced it, and I'm the channel. Yep. So in those moments, the words come through, and I'm sitting in the back. It's not like my consciousness have left. So I'm, a conscious channel. But I don't remember necessarily unless we go for a cup of tea and discuss it afterwards, because that message is meant for the client, and it just moves through me like a funnel. I'm just capturing the data and announcing it to them. And the interesting thing is we don't go into the records, because if we did, we could create circular stuff, like in a spreadsheet, a circular type argument. Mm-hmm. And what that means is, if you saw the movie Back to the Future, the first one, there was a scene where Michael Fox was in the car with his mother, only she and he were the same age. So he was his real age, and she was her teenage self, and she's wanting to make out with him because she thinks he's really cute. Mm-hmm. And as she's trying to pull him to her, he reaches in his pocket and looks at the family picture, and he is disappearing. So it's like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Kat just followed up with a question. She just said the reason she asked that about Past Not Chosen, she was just thinking, especially for those people who have been around horrible people, it'd be handy to see if someone else had been that victim. It'd be pretty similar.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And okay, so now you were talking about beings, that we're talking about the keepers and stuff, but you also in the book speak of the Akashic librarians. I mean, there's different phases. I mean, different types.
Yeah, that's a good word. Different faces, helpers. Maybe.
Yeah, or health.
It's.
Yeah. Who are they? I mean,
I haven't cataloged who's who, to be honest.
Okay.
So I don't really know the answer. Mm-hmm. What I do know is they're generally the same group. So it's kind of like when you watch a soap opera, mm-hmm. and you learn various characters, and you don't get everyone's name right away, but over time you do. So maybe it's time that I did that, but I'm always being surprised. The Keepers of the Gates, I didn't know there were Keepers of the Gates until they announced themselves. Mm-hmm. The Guides and Record Keepers is a general term, and it refers to beings that are working directly with you, that's your guides, and beings who are record keepers, they're the data set, and they're all working together to support you. Mm-hmm. And so we just use a generalized term.
Different functions. I mean, the librarians, if we go into a library now, there may be somebody at the door to greet us, but the librarian will assist us in finding what we need or point us in the right direction. Right. So I'm assuming that's the same thing.
I even like to think of the reference librarians, even, scale up.
Okay.
Because they don't let you take the book out. Mm-hmm. They stand there and they let you look at it while they're watching you. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that makes good sense. And but I've heard people say no matter how hard they've tried to successfully grab their records, they just can't seem to do it. And one of the things that you speak about in the book is of how outside energies can influence our connection to the records by blocking or shadowing the access. So who or what might be capable of blocking us? Is it somebody else? Is it us shooting ourselves in the foot? Or, what are those things that keep us outside?
Well, there's a small percentage of people who are shooting themselves in the foot, and they're blocking it themselves because they really don't want to know, even though they think they want to know. But that's a very small piece of it. Mm-hmm. The blocks and the clearing work that's required and highly recommended has to do with the fact that there are entities. And entities can be discarnate or other kinds of energy. And I wrote about that a lot in the book called Reweaving the Fabric of Your Reality. And that book is a small, high detail book explaining what that, I'll use that word, that whole category is, and how to antidote and work with it. Mm-hmm. So if you can't get in, then you do clearing work. And when I refer to entities, they could be your grandma that you looked after, who passed away and then moved into your body. instead of going home to God. And that's not malevolent. Maybe she's worried about you, or maybe you're, in a place of such compassion that you allow it. Mm-hmm. But there was a change in the rules around 1994-95, and in the old days we did tolerate dual habitation. It wasn't necessarily approved, but it wasn't against any rules. But then everything changed. One person, one soul. So that means that you and I can clear ourselves and others, because any time you experience somebody who's got entities or energies, those guys aren't allowed to be there, so they get to be cleared. Same as if you call the cops on a new neighbor who kept speeding up and down the street that the kids play ball in.
Mm-hmm. So we do have some control over that. I mean, if we can't get through, we can't get in, realize that there is something blocking, and then do a clearing and see what happens. Yeah.
Right. And then there's another area that a lot of people equate getting into the records as getting into their past lives. Mm-hmm. Now, for me personally, I have no interest in that. And the big reason I don't have any interest in it is because I'm interested in helping you be the best you can be. And there's so many people who want to know about past lives as a curiosity, more than they want to know what they need to know to help them be a better person.
Right.
And sometimes there is a reason to know that, but not always. And so I actually made a contract with the record keepers for me, so I don't generally give information about past lives unless it's for the soul's benefit. Mm-hmm. I went to a psychic and she told me I was Cleopatra, and I just want to know if that's true. I'm not interested in being the resource for that. Go to somebody else. So that's my bias, if you will.
Okay.
And then there's another piece that some people want to know about past lives, and their records are sealed. Mm. Now, it doesn't mean they can't get into the Akashic Records, but the past life records are sealed. And it turns out that there are quite a few ascended masters in embodiment right now. And they have come back for this grand slam home run where we take ourselves 5D and still keep a body. And they're going to be part of the solution. Mm. So they don't get access to past lives because it's inappropriate and or unnecessary.
Don't go away. There's more Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks right after these important messages.
Red, where are you going?
I'm going back to the paranormal view, back where I belong.
Please, take me with you.
No, I'm through with everything here. I want to see if there's something left in life I haven't explored. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Red, don't run to them. They talk about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs, and all kind of supernatural scary stuff.
You'll never understand, will you, Scarlet?
No.
Well, that's your misfortune.
Red, if you go, where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear... Line!
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
That's the Paranormal View with your host, Henry Foister, Jeffrey Gould, and Barbara Duncan. Every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the Para X Radio Network.
Missed an episode of Stirring the Cauldron? Then be sure to check out marlabrooks.com and check out the archive. And while you're there, check out Marla's weekly Witches Oracle card reading. Explore the site to find many great resources, such as information on tarot, oracle readings, metaphysical consultations, and links to all of Marla's books. That's marlabrooks.com. Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Welcome back, and I'm just going to do a little talking because Maureen has still got a little bit of congestion going on. And it's funny because the other day when I was on Elle Newman's show, she did that too. So maybe it's something, weather or something going around. It's not
Did
good.
you see what I sent you
Um,
in your chat
no.
on Skype?
No, because I didn't look at that. I got up for a second. Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. Well, that makes good sense too. That someone or something doesn't want her to disclose whatever she was going to disclose. Well, that in our metaphysical world, that happens a lot. So, I never doubt that kind of thing. I think the other day was a different matter, but yeah, it's just, you get that way and you just start going and yeah. So,
So remember, I said there are many ascended masters in embodiment right now.
Mm-hmm. and they sometimes close the records for people. So
their records are sealed because they don't need
to find out. Yeah,
exactly.
Because, and I think that's really true that there are a lot of things that we don't need to hear. And there's a lot of things that we shouldn't hear about because it would be detrimental. It may not be the way that we can figure it out, or we could, again, like I said, shoot ourselves in the foot sometimes. So, you've got a message. I'll tell you this. You, Maureen, have a message from Susan. She says, Susan Muller here, and I was on your maiden journey in Egypt with my sister Karen, and I'm very interested in participating in your class on this subject. She said she just reactivated her Merkaba, and this chat room's getting away from me, and so she's glad that she tuned in tonight, and hope you get some emails. So good, people are finding you. This is good.
Yes, and I'm so happy to hear from Susan. And I did get her email, and I'm sorry I didn't respond.
You've been around.
Yeah. Yeah, I was very happy to hear from her, actually. And I'm thrilled that she's reactivating her Merkaba. And I'm actually going back to Egypt on Wednesday.
Wow.
With a group from China that I'm leading. So
now, see, going to Egypt with a group from China. This is really good stuff. All right. I'm just let me just see something I was looking for.
Well, let me say one other thing about that.
Yeah,
subject.
sure. Yeah, go ahead.
If you are a parent of such a child, it's an ascended master, they will be unstoppable and fearless. So, as a parent, your job is not to teach them to conform. Your job is to be extremely tolerant of their extreme behavior and remind them that you have a job to keep them safe. Not chastising them, but supporting them.
Mm-hmm.
And saying, look, if this is what you want, I support you, but these are the consequences. So, it's hard to be the sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
But it's usually given to people who can handle it. So that's the other side of it.
Well, yeah, that I think, they're a lot smarter than us in who they dole out jobs to back and forth, and it works really well. Now, one of the things that I want to mention, we were talking about the records are available to all who seek them, and in one of your chapters, you discuss that they're where they are kept and how we get there. And there are also many exercises in the book that help readers along the process. But basically, if somebody says, okay, I want to access those records, I need to find out, I want to do that, what does it take? Because as I mentioned earlier, some people think you have to get into a meditative state. Some people think you have to, do astral projection. I mean, it's kind of a curiosity, and I don't know if it's one of these things where you do it the way you know how to do it, or that you're compelled to do it. But for somebody that just wants to know how to get up there, what do you say?
Well, it's interesting you offered all those other things, but aside from this business that we already talked about, clearing work, you really don't need to do anything else. And you follow a protocol. In all, not all, but many schools that teach the Akashic Records, not only mine, we start with a prayer, and we use the prayer in a certain way, and then we sit with a question that we have written out and ask. And I have various protocols that I teach you. In the book, I ask you to work with the pictures first. That gets you out of your linear thinking so that you're not looking at the picture and saying, oh, that's a picture of a teacup or that's a sky. It forces you to be a little more reflective. What do you see in this picture? And then you practice with that first, and then you practice with sample questions where you actually ask your higher self or your inner wisdom, whatever you use. And even if you don't use anything, just, what do you get when you ask, these various questions? And then you do it with the prayer, and you can see right away a difference. And that helps you recognize that there is a difference from intuition or guidance and the record keepers. And that's the first step, to discover the contrast. And then after a person practices for a while, and keep in mind, you want to learn to play the piano, you're not going to do it on the first try. You're going to get started, and everybody knows you have to practice. So the expertise comes with the practice. Some people are born with a skill, and they can learn the piano faster. Just like some people have a certain connection with the records that allows them to achieve connection deeper and faster. But everybody can have that access because a dispensation was granted. A dispensation was granted to allow anyone access to the records. And the reason the dispensation was offered is because humanity's spirituality has not caught up with its technical skill. So we have equipment and machines that can destroy forests, but we don't have the spirituality to recognize maybe we shouldn't be taking down that forest. And the classic example is that movie, it's a one-word name, now I can't think of it, Avatar.
Oh. Yeah.
And, if you had the wisdom of equal to your equipment skill, that they were at parity, then you would take a second look at that sacred tree, and you maybe cut down other things, but you wouldn't cut down the tree. And so that's part of it. The other part of it is everyone on the planet is being bathed with an amazing energy that is allowing us to access higher dimensional energies, higher dimensional skills easier than before. And finally, we're ending the age of the Kali Yuga, which is this 25,000 year cycle that the Tibetans talk about. And this new cycle is the age of Aquarius. And the age of Aquarius is exactly what that song says.
It's funny you mentioned Kali Yuga, because I did a show, an author who wrote a book on that just a few months ago. Cool. And he talked about the same thing, the cycle and whatever. So, yeah, it was very cool. And so nice that you mentioned it again, because it kind of pricked my ears up. And I went, oh, okay, this is good.
So we're at the place where we're choosing to catch up. And we'll be given this boost by taking an open book test. And I like to joke around and say, well, check the Book of Life, which is another name for the Akashic Records, and take your open book test. And then you realize it's only an opportunity.
Yeah. It's, the whole thing is just so neat to be able to think that we can do that. We can access the records. We can access records. And But they said one of the things, and I got kind of curious about this, is there a limit as to how often we should do that? Because, there's some people who might get addicted, in a sense. So is it
That's actually one of the words one of my students says. She said that energy is addictive.
Is it possible to overdo or get too carried away with it?
Well, yes, but I actually talk about that and say, stay in the records as long as you need to or want to. Mm-hmm. But if you get up for a bio break or to eat, close the records. Mm-hmm. If you have to answer the door and it's the FedEx guy and it's the package you're expecting, take your journal with you so you remember what you were doing. Put the package down and finish what you were doing. If you know it's that package and you want to open it right away, close the records. So it's a little bit of common sense. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you have to spell that type of thing out so people really get it. Now, if you had a client that was constantly calling you, that's another matter. And, of course, anybody who helps people in these ways knows that sometimes people are needy and they need to be told, you can come once a week, you can come once a month. Mm-hmm. And that's the extent of what I can do for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. Now, is it one thing I was reading that it's possible for people to get the records of others. Now, would that be for things that we are included in their lives so we could peek into those records rather than just being curious and wanting to snoop? Because, that's part of human nature. Right. And if you think you can get into somebody else's records, well, by damn, you're going to, find somebody you hate and want to get some information on them or something, So how does that work?
I think you answered your own question. That's exactly right.
Okay.
So you do get access to data that's related to your interaction with someone. A mother of a 14-year-old could get more information than she's going to get on her 34-year-old son. Right. But you get what you need. You get the information you need to understand a situation. And that's more important than just knowing about your neighbor. I mean, knowing if your neighbor's daughter is pregnant is one thing, and it's another thing to know why your neighbor is being so ornery, mm-hmm. And discovering, her daughter's pregnant and she's really upset about it. But she can't talk about it because she's so filled with shame. That's pretty cool, because then you can be compassionate instead of critical.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And like we were talking about, the book is filled with exercises and helpful information and, the do's, the don'ts, and answers just about every question that I could ask and even more. But there are people that are sitting there right now who really would like to find out what's in their Akashic Records. And that's why readers like yourself do it for them. So how does that process work when someone wants you to access their records rather than them trying to get in there?
Okay. So this involves a small contract where they sign up online and pay a fee, and then the system makes an appointment for them, or my assistant calls them, one of the two. And then when I sit down with them, I have already provided them with a worksheet to know what to expect, how I work, the fact that I'm an empath, the fact that I carry their energy until they're ready to receive it. And then a little bit about opening remarks so they know that the first part is more of me talking to them. And then I would announce, first I announce my name, their name, and your records are open. Then I give them the opening remarks. And then I would say, we're ready for questions. And what's really cool is this opening remarks part. It's like sight unseen. I don't know who the person is or what they've got on their mind. And the remarks can be so random. Like I have a regular client, and she called on her night, and her opening remarks were, I was shown that I said that what's going on is it's like, so I knew it was a metaphor. You're standing in the field, and the field has been plowed, and it's ready for the plants, and you've got all these plants, and you have to decide what to plant. But you are being told to wait. Don't act. And we're encouraging you to be patient with the system and whatever's going on in your life that's causing you to wait. And she said, that's incredible. I just came from a board meeting. She's the president of a very large health organization. And she said, we had approved a marketing budget. We had people in mind that we wanted to hire. And one of the new board members said that her brother was a marketing guru, and he liked to take cases like this pro bono and analyze what the best direction was before they start the campaign. Mm-hmm. And she was happy to have that offer. Mm-hmm. But like a child promised something, she was ready to put the plants in the ground.
Mm-hmm. It's just kind of amazing the way things turn out, you know. I mean, it's like they guide us. You know, we're just kind of like here, but they point us in the right directions, and it's for the better benefit of us, for sure. But we always think that the brilliant ideas come from our own heads, but I think otherwise. I do too. I mean, it's not that we're stupid, but there are wiser people that help plant seeds in our brains and all that. We're going to be running out of time really quickly. So why don't you tell everybody, like if people are interested in having you do a reading for them, or to learn more about how they can do it, or the Akashic Realm and the book, how can they find you? My website is MaureenSt.Germain.com, MaureenStGermain.com. You can buy my books on Amazon and any bookstore. They're available everywhere. We have free downloads, free guided meditation downloads on my website. Mm. There's a regular one that we've been offering for a couple of years now. It's the same one, and it's called Divine Government Meditation. And basically it calls for divine government, and what we're really doing is praying for our leaders. It's a wonderful meditation, and it's very easy to do, and I highly recommend everybody get it and do it at least once. You know, and I remind people, you know, if you had a teenager that was in trouble and having drugs and you came to me, I'd say, I'll say a prayer for him. So if we don't like what's going on in our government, why are we not praying for our leaders? Every time we want to utter a complaint, maybe we could turn that into a prayer. So that's what that meditation is for. Mm-hmm. And then I have a blog that I highly recommend people follow, because it's got a ton of new information every single month. And free download. Okay. So, I mean, the website is kind of the hub where everybody can find anything they need to find. So, you know, that. Yes, it is. And I do sell my CDs on CD Baby as well as my website. And there's a few on Amazon, and all my books are on Amazon, and they're also on Kindle. Great. Well, I'm going to thank you and let you go have some tea and get that congestion a little bit soothed, the throat soothed. Thank you. But I really appreciate you being here and sharing the information with us, because the Akashic Records are something that people just either don't know about or don't know enough about. Maybe that's a better way to put it. And I would like to wish you and all of our listeners a day of heaven on earth for ourselves and everyone we come in contact with. Well, thank you very much. And thank you all for listening in. And until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2019. The Mysterioso March by Kevin MacLeod is licensed through Incompetech.com.